Yeah, I was wrong. Very, very wrong. A couple days ago, as you might know if you're in the League community, the Still Here cinematic came out, and I wanted to do a little reaction video and talk a bit about what was going on in it, right as the video came out. And then, a while late, a tiny bit later, the description updated, and the next day there was a whole actual interview that talked about what was actually going on. Now, I will want to address a couple things. Of course, first say like what I said was wrong, and just talk about those things. But if you do want a more in-depth view on this whole thing and the tiny details, go watch Necrit's video. Like, just to go do that if you want a more in-depth review of the whole cinematic. What I will talk about is I will talk the points that about what was wrong, and then go about a tiny thing about each of the little sections that I wanted to go a bit more in depth about. So yeah, what's actually going on in the video? Well, if you remember, there are 3 different sections. One, which is the fight with Morgana and Kayle versus Aatrox, where they get wrecked and then they burn him alive. Then there's the Yasuo section. Yes, this is indeed an old man Yasuo, and I'll go into detail about that in a bit. And then there is the Tryndamere versus Kindred part, which is still my favorite to this point. Now, in the description and the interview, it was stated that this is supposed to be a cinematic that talks about the past, the present, and a possible future. Now, this is the past part. It's Kayle and Morgana before they had the big fight that separated them as sisters, where Morgana cast off their mother's sword and then Kayle picked it up. And then from that point, they haven't talked or anything like that. That's why I was a bit weirded out by the fact that they were working together, because initially I thought that all the 3 segments were taking place at some point in the present. Though then again, the background, which is the Demacian background, which is a lot more tribal, old, you know, they use a lot of wood rather than petricite, should have been a huge hint as to what's going on. But this could have also been just a random settlement at the edge of Demacia. That was a possibility. But yeah, that's pretty much what I wanted to correct in this situation. But I do have a tiny bit of a point I want to talk about, which is this. The way Kayle looks at Morgana after Morgana puts their mother's sword away in this scene, where she starts using her full magic in order to bind Aatrox to the ground. There is this scene where Kayle walks past Morgana, and she looks at her in a very sort of disappointed way. This, to me, is kind of tiny bit weird, because isn't Morgana's powers part of their mother's power set? Isn't the magic that Morgana is using the same magic that their mother was able to use? Now, of course, she could be looking like that towards Morgana because she just, you know, she didn't throw the sword, but she just put it away to focus fully on magic. I'm actually really curious. It's possible this was addressed in their story, but again, if you want like lore and stuff, don't come to me, because I love the lore, but I'm not the biggest and most well-versed in the whole story. That's the problem. But yeah, I'm curious about that. Then the second part, of course, we all know, it's Old Man Yasuo versus these bandits. Which this is supposed to be a vision shown to Yasuo by Kindred, which is awesome. But I'm curious, when did Kindred show Yasuo this vision? Because at least to me, from what I've seen in the recent Yasuo lore, ever since Yone came back and talked with Yasuo, and including the Ruined King, though I haven't fully played through that, it really felt like Yasuo was going on sort of a forgiving himself way. So him feeling in such a way that he would cast off using the wind technique at all feels a bit weird, but also sort of understandable. And also another part, which is I didn't catch it. So I did catch the fact that the wolf was portrayed here in the trees, but I didn't realize the arrow was Kindred's arrow. I thought it was just sort of a cool transition to the shots of Freljord with Ashe that would come up, or maybe a reference to the fact that Ashe will come up. And what I wanted to talk a bit about is the fact that Riot has started to work on a version of the lore and of the story that is now, it will be very tightly knit together. Before the announcement, Arcane was technically not canon to the core League of Legends universe. Jace, Jinx, Caitlyn, etc. had two separate stories where the universe one was the canon one and the Arcane one was the Arcane story. Now Riot, what it's doing is it's taking Arcane, universe, and Legends of Runeterra, etc., and putting them all together, doing a bunch of retcons and a bunch of changes to the stories in order for it all to fit together, which they should have done from the very start, but doing it now is really good, especially with the MMO coming out in the future and all the other games that Riot Forge might put out, plus Project L, and whatever else Riot is cooking up. The thing is, I don't really like the fact that we're shown a possible future. They have done this in the past with one of Zillion's stories, where he was looking through possible futures, which was addressed as not being necessarily that they all exist. Those futures were just possibilities, what could happen, but they do not exist as separate timelines, at least from what I've heard. So this being a vision from Kindred sort of makes sense. Kindred wants to show Yasuo the path that he would end up taking if he goes as is. If this is showing him before the Yone cinematic and before the Ruin King game, I feel like this would fit very well. If it's after, it's a bit more weird, at least in my opinion. I was honestly kind of hoping that we wouldn't go into the possible futures of Runeterra until at least after they're done with all the lore changes. But yeah, still, I really enjoyed this. And another thing that I wanted to bring up is the fact that at the end, Yasuo accepts his death. He could cast Windwall again, but he doesn't. And I feel like it's even implied through not just the fact that he's not windwalling, because he could windwall in the last second, but the fact that Kindred's arrow, Lamb's arrow, is coming to take him. The wolf is just in the background. The wolf is an afterthought. Yasuo is accepting his death. He's accepting that now it's his time. That's why the wolf is just implied, while Lamb's arrow is coming straight for him, which is beautiful imagery in my opinion. Then there is the Tryndamere part, which I didn't really speculate much about what's going on because it's obvious. It's Tryndamere on death's door. Kindred comes to collect him. His Undying Rage procs. He presses R pretty much, and then he ends up surviving because of Ashe coming in. Now, a cool detail, and something that Necrit brought up, and I do want to talk a bit about, is the fact that he said that this is all in Tryndamere's imagination, the fight with Kindred. Well, I do not believe it entirely to be the case. What I believe is going on is, yes, the wounds that he had and the fact that he parried the arrows and everything, those wounds, like can I find, like this, the bite that he gets on the shoulder armor right here, there are some scratch marks. Those are done indeed by the Winter's Claw that were around him at the very beginning. These guys. Because there's still a bunch that are slowly approaching him. Yes, that is indeed the case. But I feel like because Kindred as a concept, Kindred is death. Death itself comes in one of two ways. You fight against it, the wolf takes you out. Or you can accept it, where the lamb comes in and just shoots you. And I would bring an example here to actually say what I want to say, because it's kind of complicated when I really think about it. Imagine there is a guy running away from someone who's hunting him. He doesn't want to die, right? And he's running away through the forest, the other guy pursuing him. Well, the moment the hunted is killed, he would not see the arrow that was shot by the hunter, the one who's hunting him. What he would see would be the wolf jumping on him. Because at the moment of your death, or as you are dying, yes, the things around you happen as they happen in the real world, but you see Kindred. You see death coming and taking you in one of two ways that can. In the peaceful lamb or the vengeful wolf. Well, not vengeful. The aggressive wolf. And that's what I think is happening here. It's not all in Tryndamere's mind. The fight between him and Kindred is indeed versus the soldiers. But Kindred is actually there. The concept of death, the metaphysical, whatever you want to call it, it's still there. That's why the moment Ashe comes in and shoots the two Winterclaw behind Tryndamere, Kindred disappears. Because there's no more Winter's Claw around him. There's no more enemies that could attack Tryndamere at that point. Because Ashe just saved him. That's why I feel like Kindred was technically actually there. But then again, that's just a theory. A League theory. So yeah, that's pretty much it. Again, for a more in-depth look and a look at a lot more of the tinier details, I really recommend you watch Necrod's video. He's the go-to guy when it comes to League lore. So yeah. For example, there is this tiny thing where in the fire that Kayle shoots here, you can see that Aatrox dropped his sword. So this host of Aatrox is dead. And now someone else has to pick it up. So, but yeah, he does go in more detail about Adizar. So yeah, I wanted to just go over and just talk about what I was wrong when it came to what was going on, and also address those 3 different points that I wanted to address. So thank you for watching. If you did enjoy the content, please leave a like, comment, or subscribe. I'll see you in the next one.